Know your scope. Okay, so this is super important and really timely. Fakari White Island trials made it really clear to anyone in the know that all of those PCBUs involved, those directors at Fakari White Island Management Limited, none of them had a clue as to who was the who, who was within that scope. Who were the duty holders, upstream and downstream. None of them had stopped to think about that. And so that's one of the key things that led to the massive exposure that all of them had, is because there was all these overlapping duty holders and none of them talked to one another. Anyway, sorry. So there is a reason why in the ISO 45001 standard, section 4, which is where it really kicks off. That's where the rubber hits the road for ISO 45001. And section 4 talks almost entirely about the scope of the organization. What does it do? Who are the stakeholders? Who is involved or indirectly involved in this organization? Who are the upstream duty holders? Who are the downstream duty holders? What legislation, what regulations, what codes of practice, what influences this organization? And ISO 45001 encourages organizations to go out and to make a list, to create a register of all of this stuff, to stop and to risk assess it. What risks do the Health and Safety at Work Act present to our organization? It's a pretty high risk if we don't do anything about it. We should go and research it, learn it, ensure that we implement the critical requirements of that piece of legislation. And it's the same for codes of practice, regulations, industry best practice, and on and on and on. And it's the same for the upstream and downstream duty holders that influence your organization. So if you're in construction, it's the project management companies, the construction companies, the main contractors, the client, legislation above that. Below, subtrades, service delivery providers. And then we've got to start thinking about the lifespan of that project. Who are going to be the end users of this product? What happens when this product is unusable and gets to its expiry date? How does that matter to us? That's why the scope is right at the front of ISO standards, not only for health and safety, but we're talking environmental, quality, all of the key ISO standards that we dabble with within health and safety all speak to the same structure. Within the first section of section 4 of the ISO standards is scope and the duty holders and the influences of that organization. So my recommendation to you all with the last couple of minutes that I've got is, if you don't have a upstream, downstream duty holder register, if you don't have a legislation, regulation, codes of practice, industry best practice register for your organization, I strongly encourage you to do so and to risk assess each of those, having a think about, okay, if we don't know anything about that and we don't do anything about that, what level of risk exposure is that to the organization, and what controls can we put in place? It may be going off and learning about it and implementing what those standards require of the organization, because we bring it right back to day-to-day stuff. We're talking about Fakari and White Island. None of those PCBUs, nor the officers that were standing on trial and just being charged by the officers, had done that homework. And that was one of the key risks and exposures that they had. And this is why, bringing it right back around to ISO, is why I am continually talking about ISO 45001. We've got all these various other pre-qualification schemes. We've got all these other qualification schemes that have been produced. I don't know why, but they are there. And the one that trumps them all is ISO 45001. So if you want to avoid having to do yet another pre-qualification scheme or another self-assessment scheme, I would encourage having a look at ISO 45001, because as soon as you get certified, you all of a sudden just click that box when it comes to pre-qualification season again to say, I've got ISO 45001 certification, see you later, it's done. Saves you a heap of time and energy in the long run, I assure you. Anyway, Rant over. So we've just covered de-escalating gnarly situations in the worksite. We have just talked about how much a consultant should be charging, some of the reasons why, based on risk, okay, and the importance of knowing your scope when it comes to your business, upstream, downstream, PCBUs and duty holders, and also the regulatory framework that sits right above all of that. What do you need to be aware of, and how do you mitigate those risks using a table? Seriously, put it in writing, make it happen.